Most people think wealth announces itself. They think it arrives with a loud engine, a better watch, a bigger house, a vacation that must be photographed from the right angle, so strangers will understand that progress has occurred. That is the public version of wealth. The real version is much quieter. In fact, one of the oddest truths I have ever watched is that the people who are genuinely getting stronger financially often do not feel rich at all. They feel ordinary. Sometimes they even feel behind. They are too busy doing the unglamorous things that create wealth to enjoy the theatrical feeling of being wealthy. They save, they invest. They decline things that would have been fun for a weekend and expensive for a decade. They automate, they wait. They let time do work that impulse would have interrupted. And because real wealth is built so quietly, many people miss the signs that they are actually moving in the right direction. That matters because a person who does not recognize progress is at special risk of abandoning it. He mistakes calm for stagnation. He mistakes boredom for failure. He mistakes the absence of fireworks for the absence of results. That is a terrible misunderstanding. I have always liked businesses that made money in ways the public found too dull to admire properly. The same is true of personal wealth. The richest life is rarely the one most aggressively advertised. Very often it is the one built beneath the noise. If you want to know whether you are quietly getting rich, do not begin by asking whether your life looks expensive. Ask whether your structure is getting stronger. That is the real question, not whether people envy you, whether your choices are expanding, whether your mind is getting calmer, whether the distance between what you earn and what you need is widening, whether time is beginning to serve you instead of chasing you, whether money is becoming less emotional and more architectural. That is wealth, and a person can be much wealthier than he feels if he is measuring himself by the wrong scorecard. I want to talk about the subtle signs, because subtle signs are usually the honest ones. Big moments are often misleading. A giant bonus can come and go. A hot stock can flatter a fool. A luxury purchase can create the appearance of victory while quietly weakening the balance sheet underneath it. Subtle signs are different. They do not depend on theater. They reveal how the machinery of your life is changing. The first sign is simple enough that many people dismiss it. You have learned to live below your means without feeling deprived. This is one of the great dividing lines in finance. The person who spends less than he earns is not merely being responsible. He is creating options. The person who spends everything he earns or a little more is not merely enjoying life. He is slowly selling tomorrow in exchange for a fuller present. That is the actual trade. People like to make this sound more elegant than it is. But at bottom, it is an arithmetic decision with emotional consequences. Suppose two men each earn $75,000. One spends $55,000, one spends $80,000. The first man has $20,000 of room. The second man has a $5,000 problem disguised as lifestyle. The first man does not merely have savings potential. He has negotiating power. He has the ability to survive a disruption without immediate humiliation. He has the capacity to invest, to wait, to say no, to change jobs, to handle a broken transmission, a bad month, or an opportunity that requires cash. The second man may look more prosperous, but what he really has is a life that requires continued perfect performance. That is not prosperity. That is dependence with nicer furniture. Living below your means is the first quiet sign of wealth, because it is really a sign of independence from external signaling. When you stop needing your spending to explain you, your finances get stronger almost by accident. You stop dressing your life in proof, you start building it around intention. That is powerful. The public thinks frugality must look like clipping every coupon and resenting every small pleasure. That is not what I mean. I mean that your life stops expanding simply because your income did. You know what enough looks like. That may be one of the most valuable sentences in the English language. I know what enough looks like. The culture does not teach enough. It teaches upgrade. Upgrade the apartment. Upgrade the school district. Upgrade the car. Upgrade the vacation tier. Upgrade the kitchen. Upgrade the story other people can tell about you. Enough has no lobbyists. That is why so few people ever define it. Once you define it, something wonderful happens. Raises stop feeling like permission to spend. They start feeling like fuel for a stronger future. That is the second quiet sign. You think in long arcs instead of quick wins. This is a psychological change much more than a financial one. Most people remain trapped because they are still living in bursts. Next paycheck, next refund, next hot tip, next side hustle, next thing that promises acceleration without patience. They are organized around near-term excitement. That is not how wealth is built. Wealth is usually built by people who stop asking what they can win this month and start asking what repeated good behavior becomes after 10 or 20 years. That is a very different question. A person who invests $500 a month into a broad index fund and keeps doing it through boredom, recessions, elections, inflation scares, and the 1,000 little panics the financial media must manufacture to justify its own existence, is operating in a different emotional universe than the man who keeps lunging from stock tip to crypto idea to business scheme to this time. It's different story. One man is buying years. The other is renting stimulation. The first man may feel foolish at times because long-term thinking is not emotionally exciting. It is often repetitive. It asks you to continue without applause. The second man can feel very alive because novelty flatters the imagination. That is exactly why one ends up with wealth and the other with stories. I have never met a person who speculated his way into calm. The speculator may make money, sometimes a great deal of it, but calm usually comes from process, from knowing the machine is working, whether the month flatters you or not. Long-term thinking is not only about investments, by the way. It appears in the way you make career decisions, in how you treat your health, in how you handle relationships, in how you allocate learning, in how you think about reputation. A person quietly getting rich is often becoming long-term in all of these dimensions at once. He stops trying to feel successful immediately and starts trying to become undeniable eventually. That is a profound transition. The third quiet sign is that you have built a buffer and almost nobody knows about it. This may be one of my favorite signs because it changes not only the balance sheet but the nervous system. A person with no buffer experiences life differently. From a person with one, the person without savings is not merely poorer in dollars. He is poorer in attention. Every inconvenience becomes a threat. Every repair becomes a negotiation with fear. Every small piece of bad luck asks a humiliating question. How quickly can you come up with the money? The person with a buffer feels something much more valuable than pride. He feels room to think, room to absorb, room to wait 24 hours before panicking, room to separate annoyance from danger. That room is a form of wealth even before the money is spent. People treat emergency savings as if it were merely a practical category on a budgeting website. It is much more than that. It is a psychological moat. A family with 3 to 6 months of expenses set aside is not invincible. It is simply much harder to scare. And once fear retreats a little, intelligence gets more room to operate. I have always found that the true value of liquidity is best understood right before you need it. A man with $20,000 in reserve, when his company announces layoffs, experiences the event very differently from a man with $300 and a maxed out card. They may receive the same news. They do not live in the same world. One is concerned, the other is cornered. Cornered people make bad decisions. That is another reason I admire cash cushions. They reduce the odds that life will force stupidity. They do not need to be talked about. In fact, one of the signs that a person is quietly getting rich is that he often becomes less interested in talking about money precisely because he has built structures that make money less dramatic day to day. He is not bragging about the buffer. He barely mentions it. It sits there doing invisible work, which is often the highest kind of work. The fourth sign is stranger than many people expect. You begin earning more, and your first instinct is not to spend more. That sounds almost too simple. It is not. This is where lives separate. A raise is one of the most revealing psychological moments in adulthood. A person gets a promotion, a better role, a bigger client base, a stronger year. New money arrives. Now watch what happens. The average person experiences a rise in income as permission to revise normal upward. New apartment, nicer car, more restaurant spending, better seats, more convenience, a higher baseline. Then he says life got more expensive. No, life got more decorated. That is different. A person quietly getting rich experiences a raise differently. He feels grateful, perhaps relieved, maybe briefly tempted, and then he asks a more important question: how much of this can I keep? The rich life is not created when income. It is created when the share of the rise that becomes permanent future capital keeps growing. This is how people build surprising wealth on ordinary salaries. Not through genius, through refusing to let every increase in income become a new cost center. This is why lifestyle inflation is so dangerous. It does not feel like decline. It feels like success. You deserve better. You earned it. Why work hard if you cannot enjoy it? All of that sounds persuasive until you realize that the enjoyment was financed by shrinking the future you could have owned. Now, do not misunderstand me. I am not arguing that every raise should be locked away in a jar and never touched. That would be an unpleasant and unnecessary life philosophy. I am arguing that a quiet, rich life is built when income rises faster than lifestyle, not when they rise together in obedient lockstep. A man who goes from 60,000 to 80,000 and still lives roughly like the 60,000 version of himself for a while has done something extremely important. He has converted earnings growth into optionality rather than into proof. That choice compounds brutally over time. The fifth sign is internal and therefore missed by almost everyone looking only at visible wealth. You have stopped comparing yourself to other people. This is a major financial milestone because comparison is one of the most expensive habits in the modern world. Comparison is rarely about information. It is about emotional destabilization. The car in the neighbor's driveway, the trip on social media, the renovation, the school, the kitchen, the watch, the furniture, the business success story told with all the unprofitable years removed for presentation purposes. Most people are making money decisions inside a theater they did not build and do not control. They are reacting to what they saw, not to what they need. This is why visible wealth is so dangerous. A lot of visible wealth is financed. A lot of visible wealth is performative. A lot of visible wealth is simply current income being converted into current image at the direct expense of later freedom. But if you do not know that, or worse, if you know it and still cannot stop emotionally reacting to it, then you become an easy target for debt, vanity, and regret. The person quietly getting rich stops feeling insulted by someone else's spending. He sees the expensive truck and thinks, I hope that works for him. He sees the giant vacation and does not reinterpret his own life as failure because somebody else exported a highlight to the internet. He sees friends stretch into a bigger house and does not automatically assume that imitation is maturity. This calm is not indifference. It is sovereignty. It means your financial decisions are now being governed by your plan rather than by somebody else's visibility. That is what real confidence looks like. The comparison-driven life is always financially fragile because it requires external actors to keep telling you what enough should look like. Once you stop comparing, you become much harder to manipulate. That is valuable in a consumer society built on the opposite impulse. The sixth sign is one many people will not understand until it happens. Money is no longer the main topic in your mind all day. When a person is financially strained, money is not a tool. It is the weather. It is everywhere. Every lunch, every gas station stop, every text from the bank, every social plan, every unexpected invitation, every birthday, every holiday, every repair. The mind does constant silent arithmetic. Can I afford it? Should I move this payment? Can that wait? Will the card go through? This is exhausting, and what is exhausting is not always what is visible from outside. Two people can sit in the same coffee shop and look equally composed, while one of them is living inside a rolling debate with numbers all day long. That is why I think one of the true signs of quiet wealth is that money begins to retreat from the center of consciousness. Not because the person became careless, because he became organized. Bills are automated. Investments are automated. Savings happen without fresh argument. The emergency fund exists. The debt is controlled or gone. The insurance is in place. The portfolio is not perfect, but it is coherent. Money has become background architecture instead of daily drama. This is one of the finest upgrades a person can give himself, and it is invisible to almost everybody else. The person still goes to work, still buys groceries, still lives an ordinary-looking life, but his mental space has changed. That matters because mental space gets converted into better life decisions. A man whose finances no longer demand constant attention can finally think about things that matter more. His family, his work, his contribution, his long-term direction. This is one reason I say that boring money is often the best kind. Boring money gives you an interesting life. Exciting money often demands all of your attention and then wonders why you are tired. The seventh sign is one I prize more the older I get. You have started valuing time more than display. This is a profound shift. Poor thinking is often richer thinking, in the deepest sense, becomes organized around time. Not because objects are evil, because time is the only asset that cannot be replenished by later effort. A younger person usually treats time with casual abundance. Understandably, it appears endless when you are 30 by 40 and 50. The truth becomes harder to ignore. You begin to notice what your calendar is costing you. You begin to notice the relationship between money and control of your hours. You begin to see that a great deal of what society calls ambition is really just the repeated sacrifice of time in exchange for symbols. Now, a person quietly getting rich often starts making decisions that look strange from outside and feel very sane from inside. He pays for convenience if it buys back meaningful hours. He stops glorifying being busy for its own sake. He says no more easily. He prefers white space on the calendar to one more performative commitment. He starts asking not only what something costs in dollars, but what it costs in life. That is a different class of thinking. It means money has stopped being only a scoreboard and started becoming a tool for shaping experience. A person who pays a cleaner a modest amount because it gives him back 3 hours with his children is not wasting money. He may be one of the few people in his neighborhood who understands what money is for. A person who keeps everything because he can do it himself may save dollars and lose the life those hours could have supported. The point is not that outsourcing every inconvenience is noble. The point is that time becomes more visible once your finances stabilize enough that you can see what is really being traded. The rich in spirit begin wanting less frantic proof and more ownership over their own days. That is not laziness. It is maturity. The eighth sign, and perhaps the deepest one, is that you stop making excuses and start taking ownership. This is where wealth begins touching character directly. A person quietly getting rich usually changes the way he talks long before he changes the way he looks. He stops saying, "I cannot afford that," and starts saying, "That is not a priority right now." He stops explaining his whole financial life through politicians, parents, inflation, bosses, rent, student loans, the city, the economy, the algorithm, the unfairness of other people having it easier. Now, let me be clear. Many constraints are real. Some people begin much farther back than others. Some people have genuinely hostile circumstances. Some people were handed a rotten start in the lottery of birth. Geography, family, health, or timing. I am not blind to that. But there is still a dividing line inside every set of circumstances. One person says, "Given the structure I am in, what can I control?" Another says, "Because the structure is unfair, my next bad decision is excused." The first person builds, the second person explains. This is one of the oldest patterns in life. The person taking ownership does not deny constraints. He simply refuses to become emotionally organized around them. He will live with a roommate if that cuts housing cost enough to create margin. He will bike to work if that eliminates a car payment. He will meal prep if that stops leak spending. He will say no to the apartment upgrade because the portfolio matters more. He will not call those things deprivation if they serve his actual goals. He will call them choices. That is what ownership sounds like. A person quietly getting rich sounds less like a victim and more like an allocator. That is the right word. Allocator. He is taking resources, time, energy, and cash and directing them deliberately rather than merely reacting. The poor version of this mindset is blame. The strong version is agency. Once agency appears, wealth often follows more naturally than people expect because money begins to go where intention points instead of where pressure pushes. Now, after saying all of that, I want to tell you something important. You do not need all 8 of these signs for your life to be improving. That is not how this works. If you have even 2 or 3, something meaningful may already be happening. You may simply be too early in the process to feel rich yet. That is another thing people misunderstand. Wealth often becomes visible to other people much later than it becomes structurally real. The people getting stronger do not always feel stronger at first. They may still feel careful, still feel ordinary, still question whether they are doing enough. That is normal. The early experience of getting rich is not abundance. It is often quiet discipline with delayed emotional proof. That is why so many people leave the path. They keep waiting for a jackpot feeling that real wealth rarely provides. Real wealth is not confetti. It is optional. It is margin. It is the ability to say no. It is not fearing the next repair. It is a calm checking account. It is a raise that becomes capital instead of costume. It is a mind less colonized by comparison. It is money becoming background process instead of emotional weather. It is time beginning to feel less mortgaged. It is ownership replacing excuse. That is real wealth. And because it develops inwardly before it becomes outwardly visible, a person on the right path often doubts himself at exactly the moment he should be trusting the process. I have spent my whole life watching people misunderstand what success looks like in the middle. In the middle, success is usually not beautiful. It is repetitive, it is subtle. It often looks boring from the outside. That is true in investing. It is true in marriage. It is true in health. It is true in almost every worthwhile thing. The beginning is not glamorous. The middle is not dramatic. Only the ending gets photographed. That is why I want you to respect the subtle signs. They are the truthful signs. If you are living below your means without bitterness, thinking in decades, building a buffer, increasing income without surrendering to lifestyle inflation, freeing yourself from comparison, letting money become less central, valuing time more highly, and taking ownership of what you can control. Then you may already be doing something rare. You may be building a life that gets richer before it gets louder. That is exactly the right order, because loud wealth without quiet structure is usually fragile. Quiet wealth with strong structure becomes very hard to break. A recession may slow it. A job loss may test it. Doubt may visit it. But it is not built on vanity, so vanity cannot destroy it. It is not built on debt, fueled proof, so proof cannot be withdrawn and take the whole identity with it. It is built on habits, margins, systems, and choices that keep paying. That is why I trust quiet wealth more than visible wealth. Visible wealth can be borrowed. Quiet wealth usually has to be built. And built things are the ones that last. So if it does not feel like you are getting rich yet, do not panic. The people truly becoming stronger often feel that way for a long time. They are too busy doing the work first. The feeling comes later, if it comes at all. That is fine. I would much rather have the structure than the feeling. The feeling can be rented, the structure cannot. And in the end, the structure is what buys the calm life almost everybody says they want, and so few are willing to build. That is the life I would choose, quietly, deliberately, without needing anyone else to notice before it becomes true.